I'm Gary Isaacs on the Ike Pickett Show. Have you ever wondered why cleaner energy has not been produced by scientists by now? There are several occasions when suppression of better technology has occurred, but for now let me share just one example with you today. You can hear this out, or you can draw the uninformed conclusion that has been fed to the public since 1989. Two professors, Martin Fleischmann from the University of Southampton in England and Stanley Pons at the University of Utah, announced in 1989 that they had discovered a way to produce energy from water at room temperature. The idea became known as cold fusion. Their first experience with cold fusion occurred at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. After finding more energy out than was put in, called excess energy, they disclosed to academia and the federal government that they had produced evidence that tends toward the invalidation, or at least an upgrade, of what is known as the second rule of thermodynamics. More energy is produced from water than the energy required to produce it. Meanwhile, Stephen Jones at Brigham Young University had been working on what he called muon-catalyzed fusion and had been published in the Scientific American magazine in July 1987. Jones, Pons, and Fleischmann were discussing their work with one another along the way and had apparently agreed to publish their work simultaneously. However, the University of Utah wanted first preference. They pressured Pons and Fleischmann to publish their works ahead of Jones in the Journal of Electroanalytical Chemistry. An application was later filed for funding to the United States Department of Energy for Pons and Fleischmann in 1988, but it was subsequently declined. The question is, why? George H.W. Bush of Zapata Petroleum Corporation was the President of the United States at the time of the disclosure of cold fusion to the federal government, and Glenn Seaborg, his energy secretary, was the head of the Atomic Energy Commission. Both Bush and Seaborg had reasons to resist such an energy alternative, and they also had strong reasons for the public not to believe it and to have it debunked, let alone funded. They both had very high conflicts of interest. Bush was in the oil business, and Seaborg's reputation rested on nuclear energy. Seaborg met with President Bush in April 1989 about the cold fusion issue. He later stated this, quote, "I told the president, you can't just go out and say cold fusion is invalid. You have to select a high-level panel to study it for 6 months, and they'll say it's not valid." And that's what he did. End of quote. Of course, the high-level panel was selected from a cadre of scientists that had devoted their careers to the exact opposite technology. It would not be the first time free energy would be put away for the sake of money and personal purpose. J.P. Morgan put away the idea of hydrogen from water at the turn of the 20th century in favor of petroleum because he saw no money in it. Water was too plentiful, and it was free. He could not fund such a project because there would be no return on his investment. Cold fusion was also discredited by the scientific community of journalists who continuously published the opinions of the high-level panel as fact. Opinions are not facts until proven. This was a huge step toward a news media that would head down the track of fake news and the reporting of false flags as facts without sufficient evidence to support their stories. They were reporting only what they were being told to by whom they perceived to be the important people in the world and were ignoring and actively discrediting the other side. After all, that's who was paying them. This phenomenon became particularly evident in 2020, when health organizations at all levels followed the dictates of the World Health Organization rather than learning and advocating the real science. States and hospitals being funded and paid to put forth the false information helped them to compromise true principles and stick with the propaganda of the globalists. I guess an excuse could be made that understanding the real science was not their jobs, so they could not be held responsible. Besides, the news media was backing up the momentous pandemic dossier. Although the globalist Bush was personally involved in the petroleum energy business, Seaborg probably had the biggest ego to protect. Billions of dollars had been funded by the government and spent by the hot fusion community that such an alternative could break down their whole house, their high station, and even their fortunes. Academia had by that time become very dependent on the funds that had been provided for their research in nuclear fission. Much like the global warming craze, taxpayers had been funding their research for decades, to say nothing for the loss of pride and sense of purpose for the many professors and students that had compromised and dedicated themselves to its development, along with climate change, in exchange for financial support for their research. Dangerous as it was, nuclear energy, like rocket science and global warming, in the interest of Keynesian economic tax and spend methods, got the attention and the funding from the taxpayers for its development. The personal interests of Bush would be masked and protected, and there'd still be a lot of money to be made by the Bush family and others in the petroleum industry. The truth was suppressed, and the liars would prevail for some time to come. Pons and Fleischmann, discouraged and mistrusting of the United States government, with their reputations destroyed by the naysayers, left the country and moved to France to continue their work and to consult for other applications. But France was no better. Scientist Eugene Mallove and others at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the most prestigious university in the nation for science, had experienced an excess energy result from their replications of the Pons and Fleischmann experiments. But according to Mallove, the graph showing the result was overlaid by a plain water experiment. The true result was suppressed, and the negative result was put forth as true findings. The institution had to protect the source of their funding. They could not bite the hand that was feeding them, so they lied. Mallove later resigned from MIT because of what he disappointedly saw as fraudulent behavior by the institution that he had previously so greatly respected. He wrote a book titled Fire from Ice about his experience. Meanwhile, Texas A&M University and others were finding verification of excess energy in their replication, but their findings were overridden by Bush and Seaborg's high-level panel in the scientific media publications. Cold fusion was pronounced dead on arrival. I'm Gary Isaacs with the Ike Pickett Show. Open my website, myintegritypath.com, and learn more about the changes that are rapidly happening right now. I also have a new book, Hidden Elements of a Better World, soon to be available in audio on the website. I'll be back soon, but in the meantime, my advice is that you don't be afraid to repent when necessary, and sleep well at night, knowing that your integrity and your savings are in your own custody.
Listen to the wind in the junipers and the tales of the shifting, whispering sand.